Okay, this is very symbolic lighting because today I want to talk about a very intellectual subject which I have taken seriously for quite a while. And the way I found out about it was from the 48 Laws of Power. So one of the main thinkers, you could say, from the 48 Laws of Power, or helped create the 48 Laws of Power, in Robert Greene's view, the author, is a diplomat called Niccolo Machiavelli. And he was born in 1469 and died in 1527, if I'm correct. Now, I have always found Machiavellianism very interesting because it is classed as one of the dark triad traits, and what sets it apart are two things. One, it's not classed as a disorder like the others. So let's go through the dark triad quickly, okay? At the top, or anywhere, it doesn't really matter where it is, you have the narcissist. Then the second is the psychopath. And the third is Machiavellianism. Now, as I said, Machiavellianism isn't classed as a disorder, and it can't be passed genetically. This is viewing it as a personality type. So it can't be passed genetically, and it has to be nurtured. So his main work, disrupting work, was The Prince. And for a bit of context, there was a whole category, or genre you could say, of writing where the theme revolved around someone giving advice to an incumbent king or an upcoming prince trying to obtain, but more importantly, keep power. Because in Niccolo Machiavelli's view, if I'm not mistaken, getting power is a lot easier than keeping it. And you can see that throughout the modern world. You see, we have elections very frequently in the grand scheme of things. Of course, it could take 4 or 5 years, 4 years for America, 5 years for the United Kingdom, but still, that's pretty often in the grand scheme of things. If one person was trying to obtain power for their whole life, it's very difficult to do so, and that's what democracy has been set up to achieve. It's very difficult for one person to be an autocratic ruler. Now, when this book or letter or essay was written, democracy didn't exist. Well, it did in its infancy, but not currently. It did in ancient Greek, things like that. However, the book revolves around giving advice to a prince, as I said, an upcoming prince, on keeping power. And a very famous quote from it is much safer to be feared than to be loved. Now, what are some examples of this? I'll give you an example. In Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power, he cites an event where a leader decides to use brute force to assert his dominance. And this is an example of this. I can't cite the exact story. However, I can generally remember someone fucked up in a war, okay? So there's a war going on, and on one side, someone did something bad. In fact, no, it was the leader who did something bad. The leader had fucked up somehow, but because he was in charge, he had control. Now, the army, or the people he had control over, they wanted repercussion. They wanted a consequence for this because they were suffering because of it. And this is an example, in my opinion, of the human desire that wants I think, in my opinion, there's a human innate desire that can justify heinous acts if it's an eye for an eye sort of situation. And what I mean by that is if someone kills someone, then they would happily see that person killed themselves because that's their philosophy. So in this situation, what does the leader do? The leader gets someone completely innocent and executes him. He was the scapegoat. He didn't do anything wrong, but he was executed. After he did this, all his problems had been solved. Because the people had got what they wanted, or what they thought they'd wanted. They'd got a consequence. The leader could have just stepped down. But instead, he managed to shift the blame onto someone who didn't do it. And playing on this desire for human nature of wanting justifiable consequences for actions is the very rare occasion where moral people decide they want immoral acts done, because that's an argument in itself. To be completely moral, should you not carry out immoral acts onto people who've committed immoral acts themselves? But then you come across the dilemma where if you're committing immoral acts on someone who committed immoral acts on someone else, are you not therefore yourself liable for an immoral action, thereby making you eligible to be punished yourself? Do you understand? Now, is Machiavellianism applicable in today's world? I would say much less so than it used to. As we know, The Prince was written in a context where someone had complete absolute rule over a populace. Therefore, The Prince was written in a structure and context where he assumed the king or prince had certain powers already. Now, that doesn't exist anymore unless you are an absolute monarch or an autocratic ruler. And from where I'm from, the United Kingdom, that's just impossible to implement because we live in a democracy, and democracies have been meticulously designed to prevent one person from obtaining power until they die. However, does the philosophy still stand? Is it still better to be a feared ruler than a loved one? Or safer for that ruler? Put it like this. Currently in UK politics, if a party member votes in a way where, in the UK, if a member of our parliament votes in the wrong way that they were told to by the leader, if they were told to, they will get the whip removed. What does that mean? They've been kicked from the party. They can still operate in parliament, but they've been effectively kicked from the party. What is that an example of? That's an example of being a feared ruler instead of a loved one, because the Prime Minister is threatening to kick you out. Now, of course, it's nowhere near as gruesome or grotesque or heinous as the violent acts committed 500 years ago, but the principle remains the same. And that goes to my point. No matter how close to a utopia we think we are, or how technologically advanced we think we are, or how many laws we implement, or how many rights we give, or how many backstops we set up. The physical realm is always dictated by brute force and violence. Think about it. Laws are followed because of the prospect of brute force and violence. You might get put in prison. That's a place where a lot of brute force and violence happens. In fact, you could even say prisons are pockets of the country which are lawless in a way. Of course, laws still apply, but there's no one to enforce them there, especially now. And that's my overarching philosophy that I think will stand the test of time. Everything comes back to violence. And it's a pretty pessimistic view, but a lot of realism can be seen as pessimistic, just how a lot of idealism is seen as optimistic. They're intertwined very closely. And I sometimes catch myself thinking, am I being too pessimistic? But then, is it better to be a realist than an idealist? I would say so. I'd say that a realist view is actually more idealistic than an idealistic view. Yeah. But that's just my opinion. There's lots of different schools of thoughts about this, I think, where the topic I'm talking about is how Machiavellianism is still applicable to today, and whether violence will always be the level on which everything is carried out upon. So, yeah, I think it will forever. There's no chasing from it. And that's why it's so important to become confident in your ability to defend yourself, whether you're man, woman, child. Gotta protect yourself, bro, especially in current times. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. I like this more intellectual topic, but we'll be going back to the self-improvement stuff next time. Thank you. Smile with here. This is how you know someone's not smiling. Okay, watch. Fake smile. Real smile. Got you, bro. Let's fucking get it.